Hello, and welcome to yet another booktube video blog, vlog, whatever you want to call it, with me, Jessica Day George, talking about books I love. This is what I loosely call Jessica Recommends. And this time I actually managed to get the camera flipped so you will be able to read the titles of the books I'm talking about. Yay! I'm just very low tech. So first of all, to get us started off, what am I reading right now? I am reading Silver on the Tree Aloud to My Kids. It's by Susan Cooper. It's the last book in the Dark is Rising sequence. I am listening to the audiobook of The Fires of Heaven by Robert Jordan, and I am reading a novel love story by Ashley Poston. Just delightful and kind of ties into this week's theme, but not as well as my t-shirt. See if you can guess. That's right, talking about witchcraft. Talking about those classic witch books. I'm just the hugest fan. I love those stories. I've loved them since I was little, of the witch, the pointy hat. I should have worn one of my pointy hats. I'm basically a witch every Halloween, and I have now a whole collection of hats because every year I find a new, even cooler one. I've got, purple with veils that come down, and I've got black velvet with moons and stars on it and things like that. And should have worn a witch hat, but I just wore a witch t-shirt. And I also have teased in my previous videos about that little book cart that is usually back there, right? And now it's not there. It's right here. And what is on that book cart? Aside from Duo, the Duolingo owl, here to threaten me because I have a 1,185-day streak, and if I lose it, Duo knows where I live. I'm brushing up my Norwegian and also my German a little bit. I tried learning Welsh. It didn't go well. I might come back to it, but I do Duolingo every day like a good girl. But on this little cart, which I got for Christmas, I decided to keep books that are sort of research for what I'm writing. I don't do a ton of research. What I do is read other similar books to sort of keep me in that mood, give me that vibe, but also just see what else is out there. Like, is mine too close to this other super popular book? I don't worry about stealing ideas from there because that's not a thing. It would be too obvious, I think. But what I do want is to like sort of keep in that mood. So I have been working on a book for a while, on a manuscript about a witch, a young witch. And it would be a very classic story, the pointy hats, the familiars, the broomsticks, the cauldrons, that type of witch. And she does live in our real world, in our timeline, in our time. She has a cell phone, and she's also a little witch. But I've always loved that kind of story. So when I started coming up with this idea, I'm like, I could not remember, like, well, which book was it where they did this and that? And which book was it where they did this? And also, what's that new book? Witches are very hot right now. They are very courant. So I was like, I need to know what's out there. And then I also needed to find the books that were around when I was a kid that sort of put me in that type of mood, not even necessarily for Halloween. Um, I wanted this book to go for any time and not just be set around Halloween. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about the great witch books that I love from my youth, from more recent days, starting off with a picture book, of course, Room on the Broom by Julia Donaldson and Axel Scheffler. This is fan-freaking-tastic. If you don't know it, it is a great, all of Julia Donaldson's books are amazing. She did Stickman. She's done so many great ones. This is the first one of hers I ever found it like at the register at Barnes & Noble. It was like $1 with your purchase during October a few years ago. And it's just a delight. Also, special bonus, has a dragon in it. So I'm gonna love it. And of course this, which I picked up at a library sale, and it looks totally trashed, and I just don't care. I love it so much. I should probably get a new one though. But The Witch's Broom by our good friend Chris Van Allsburg, who also, of course, did Jumanji, you recognize his style, about a witch's broom that gets lost, and an old lady picks it up and takes it back to her house. Delightful story, fun twist ending, sort of Sorcerer's Apprentice vibes too. Um, but moving on to what I have here on my cart for vibes as well. Well, and of course I had to find this. Um, my husband, we're not just like big Disney people, but my husband also is Donald Duck is his guy. Donald Duck is the classic character that he loves the best. So we have Donald Duck and the Witch Next Door, a little golden book, which I had to find, especially because my girl, the bad girl, is my girl, Madam Mim. And I was looking for another project for where Mim had appeared in Disney stories and Disney lore. She in the Big Book of Villains, she is. She also appeared in several Halloween specials and in this book. So my girl, Madam Mim, is in it. So you know I love that. Um, this one, which weirdly enough, I think I only saw as some kind of like PBS special, like a live action sort of made for TV movie of it about a girl whose um, mother is mistaken for a witch. My Mother the Witch by Rose Blue. And it's sort of a twist on the Witch of Blackbird Pond. And I couldn't put my finger on it, and I knew it somewhere and was looking for it forever. And then someone on a Goodreads group called What's the Name of That Book? Uh, was like, oh, I think it's called My Mother the Witch. I think I remember that. And so anyway, was able to find that last year. But of course, we've got the classics. The Worst Witch by Jill Murphy. I have this entire series. I read it aloud to my kids. We absolutely loved it. I loved it when I was a kid. Excuse me. And I even more bonus points to her for Jill Murphy started writing these books when she was incredibly young. She was basically at school writing these stories about what it would be like to go to witch school. And I just think it's too delightful because just this poor girl gets blamed for everything. Everything goes wrong for her, but she's sort of like the anti-witch. Like her potions turn out nice, like they do nice things. And her familiar is not a black cat, it's a gray cat. And she's so cute and I just adore her. And there's the fun new series about it, which I think they leaned a little too hard into making it sort of a Harry Potter thing, which is fine. It's cute. We like the first few episodes, but I prefer the books. So Witch Wars by Sybil Pounder. Delightful series, very modern. They wear jeans and things like that. And it's very sort of like witch culture. Like, what are the witch fashions? What are the witches wearing this season? And, what spells are in vogue and things like that. Super cute series. I've just read the second one, Witch Switch. So darling, love it to pieces. This is actually an advanced reader copy I got way back in the day and read aloud to my kids and love it, but do pick up the really copy because they are illustrated and some of the art is not in the arc, of course, but like this is. So they're illustrated, they're fun, they're delightful. Of course, I had to bring up Diana Wynne Jones because who would I be if I didn't? One of her numerous witch books, Witch's Business by Diana Wynne Jones. Delightful. Just found this, hadn't read it. One of the few I hadn't read. Found this a couple of years ago by Diana Wynne Jones. Wise Child, a book I was obsessed with as a kid and read over and over again, sort of loosely based on like sort of more of like Scottish historical fiction or Welsh, not even 100% sure, Cornwall, somewhere that sort of went over my head as a kid. But Monica Furlong, she's actually now written an entire trilogy about Wise Child, Juniper, who was Wise Child's teacher, so sort of a prequel, and then Coleman is the sequel about her friend and just this girl, little orphan girl who has to be farmed out to someone when her grandma dies and she is orphaned and gets picked up by the woman everyone says is the local witch and taken back to her house to live in the witch's house and be her apprentice. And it's just, they're wonderful, wonderful sort of medieval fantasy. I mean, it's set way back in the day, way back in the day. So delightful. These, so darling. This is The Daring of Della Dupree by Natasha Lowe. Again, there are little illustrations and stuff in these books, and it is part of an entire series just about intrepid little girls learning to be witches. Except some of them are not good at being witches, and some of them are good at being witches but don't want to be witches. And there's a lot of things about baking and opening a bakery and delightful treats. And there's recipes in the books, and they are so cute and so fun. I think I have all of them on here. I'll keep holding them up when I find them. Hooky, which is just recent, and I've just been seeing more stuff about it. Miriam Bonastra Tour probably murdered that name. Very sorry. But Hooky, graphic novel about a pair of twins, which is sort of on the run, sort of unusual, kind of dark, kind of love it. And I assumed it was Japanese because of the style, the way it was done. I assumed it was a manga, except it's, you know, front to back the way we see it in Western literature and stuff. And turns out the author is French. So published by Webtoon, absolutely delightful. Loved Hooky. Here's our other Dinah Wynne Jones, of course. Witch Week, but pretty much any Dinah Wynne Jones you can pick up, and there's going to be a witch in there. Just like literally anything. But Witch Week, of course, right there in the title. Delightful story. One of the first books to be brought back during the early days of like sort of Harry Potter madness. While people were waiting for the next Harry Potter book, they started bringing Witch Week and Dinah Wynne Jones back into print in this country to sort of capitalize on that. Like, hey, if your kid likes Harry Potter, have they tried this? And yeah, I was like, yeah, this is the way to go. This is what I grew up with, and it's fabulous. You guys all know how much I love Dinah Wynne Jones, so need I say more? I need not. Kiki's Delivery Service by Aiko Kodona, just delightful. And of course, there's a delightful Miyazaki movie about it, but just, it's just so good-hearted. Just this witch going around, just in her first year of being a full-fledged witch, what can she do to help the people of her village, and how the people of the village help her. And it's just so precious. And I love her cat Gigi so much. My friend's daughter wanted to be not Kiki, but Gigi for Halloween this last Halloween. And so my friend dressed up as Kiki so her daughter could be Gigi, and it was perfection. Witches of Brooklyn, another fun new by Sophie Escobas. And another fun, I love the graphic novels. Another fun graphic novel about witches, about this witch living in Brooklyn with her grandma and, you know, various relatives and things like that, grandma. And I love how it's drawn, because the style honestly reminds me of like newspaper comic strips from when I was growing up, like in the 80s and 90s, the way the granny looks and stuff like that. She honestly reminds me of something from like a, not Calvin and Hobbes, but even earlier than that, or like Mother Goose and Grimm or something like that. And a super fun story about how they, in this first one, about how they help an influencer who has like a weird hex on her and stuff. It was really different. Eva Evergreen, Semi-Magical Witch, which was absolutely delightful. Julia Bay, and really reminded me of Kiki's Delivery Service, sort of a witch that she has to prove herself in her first year, but this particular witch does not have a lot of power. And so she was really working hard to prove herself, and the people of the town where she was assigned to work did not want her because they wanted a real witch who would actually be able to help them. And sort of how she came up with workarounds for her magic problems and things like that was really great. Of course, Earwig and the Witch, one of her last books. Wonderful, delightful, so cute, illustrated, really short, kind of almost like an early chapter book, really. So these are moving on into middle grade. The Witch Family, which I read to my kids by Eleanor Estes, who we all know, grew up with her. She did all kinds of books, but The Witch Family is very much like a story told by a 6-year-old. It's the witch family is like, this is the mommy witch and the baby witch and the witch who's the same age as me, and that kind of story, and really cute. And but I read it aloud to my kids, who are like, the 19-year-old wasn't home at the time, but I read it aloud like Halloween to an almost 12-year-old and a 15-year-old, and they were sort of like, okay. It skews very young. It's a really fun read aloud, but it's a fun read aloud for like much younger kids. And of course, more of our delightful Natasha Lowe books. This is the whole series. The Courage of Kat Campbell. The Power of Poppy Pendle. And the first one we ever found was The Marvelous Magic of Miss Mabel, which just, I read it to the whole family way back when we first found him. Absolutely delightful. Just Miss Mabel is just the most precious thing. And we loved the book so much. We had to get them all. Um, The Little Witch by Ottfried Preussler, a German story you will probably recognize. It has been made into movies that have been dubbed into English. It has been made into cartoons back in the day. I think it's been made into Saturday morning specials, but this is really sort of the classic witch, and this is what witches do, and this is what witches eat, and this is how witches live. Like, everything gross and spiders on everything and pointy hats and flying on her broom and things like that. Super cute, and you would totally recognize this story just sort of viscerally as something you've heard before. This is one of the New York Times Review of Books publications. I am a sucker for these. I love the way they are bound and everything, and I've tried to collect them all. The OK Witch. A couple of years ago, when I was first starting to really get into I think I want to spread a story about a classic witch story, I discovered The OK Witch by Emma Steinkellner, which is a graphic novel. And I had to go, this one is not kept on my little rack here. Some of these do belong to my 15-year-old daughter, but she lets me keep them in my office. She will not let me keep this in my office. This is her favorite. We love The OK Witch, both of us. Absolutely delightful. I don't want to spoil anything except to say that her familiar just about steals the show, every frame of it. And then the sequel, The OK Witch and The Hungry Shadow, equally delightful. I love everything about these. They are just precious beyond all reason. They are both a ghost story, a murder mystery. They kind of have it all. And then they're super humorous. There's some romance. I mean, they've got everything going on in them, and I love them so much. These are sort of upper middle grade, I will say, middle school age. She goes to middle school, that kind of thing. So for our teens, of course, Maggie Stiefvater's The Raven Boys, Lily Blue, one of the characters who becomes friends with the Raven Boys, is a witch from a house of witches. Everyone who lives in her house is a lady witch, and I love it. I love it that it's a modern setting in a posh private school. The Raven Boys, they go to this posh private school and all this stuff. Yet at the same time, on the edge of their town, here is this house full of witches, full of spiders, and people reading your tea leaves when you come to the house, and checking your palm for your lifeline and all that stuff. I just, my favorite thing. Now, ladies, for us adult ladies and gentlemen who prefer a more adult story, Sorcery and the Single Girl by Mindy Klasky. The Washington Witches, I think, is the name of the series now. Delightful. Jane Madison, or the Jane Madison stories. Jane Madison is a librarian working for the Library of Congress, and she goes to live in a little cottage on the back of the property of the branch of the library where she's working, and in that is a bunch of spell books and a black cat that is now her familiar because she's the witch that took over the cottage. Wonderful, little bit of spicy. There's at least 3 Jane Madison books, I want to say. That's how many I have. There might be more. Mindy Klasky, a delightful person also, who writes wonderful fantasy books, but I am partial to these. It's sort of an updated Bewitched type of situation. Mr. and Mrs. Witch by Gwenda Bond, which just came out. Also, a little bit of spice for you. Sort of the Mr. and Mrs. Smith concept of where this couple gets married and then realizes very quickly at the wedding that they are from opposing teams. They are not opposing assassins. However, she is a witch and he is a witch hunter, and their families have been fighting for hundreds of years. And it's fabulous. It's so fun. There's intrigue, there's high-tech stuff, there's magic, there's, spice. So great, by the wonderful Gwenda Bond. Love that book. And then back to Diana Wynne Jones. I just found my very own copy of this book and just finally read it. A Sudden Wild Magic is the one book that she wrote for adults, and it is about the witches of Earth who discover that catastrophes on our planet are being caused by magicians from another planet. And so to protect the Earth, they send a delegation of lady witches to fight these magicians by any means possible. It's was supposed to be so scandalous, but honestly, this book was written in the early 80s. So it is like early 80s bow chicka wow wow, like nothing on the page, if you will. But it's just like the implication is there that like these witches are lightly seducing the magicians. And it's so tame by today's standards, but I just remember growing up when I heard that she'd written an adult book and they're like, yes, and it's so shocking, and like I remember asking a librarian if she would order it for me. She's like, no, you're too young. And I'm like, oh my. And I finally, it's been out of print forever and a day. And I finally found a used copy and I'm like, that's the big scandal. It was delightful. It's so cute and funny. And it is classic Dinah Wynne Jones. If you love her books, this is classic her. It reminded me of Archer's Goon, Witch Week, all of that, like vibes from all of those, and just like so darling. And like when I say it was spicy, it's like somebody put some pepper and salt on your food type of spicy. So it's for adults because I don't think kids would get it or care. But anyway, Sudden Wild Magic. So excited about that. But I am just very excited about this book I'm working on. And I love witches. And so go out and it's never too soon to start planning your Halloween reading, is it? It's never too soon to start looking for these books and get ready for spooky season. I mean, Joanne Fabric already has a giant talking plastic skeleton yelling at you when you walk into it, and all of the fabric and tea towels and notions are completely covered in bats. So you might as well go ahead and get yourself some witch literature to read, and maybe my next video will be about vampires, and then after that ghosts, and we'll do all the classics. So thank you so much for listening. Happy reading, and we will see you next week.